What is going on, everyone? NFL Week 1 is in the books, and that means it is time for NFL Power Rankings to make their weekly return here on the channel. I have souped up the graphics from what we've had over the last few years. I really hope you guys enjoy them. Before we dive in, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that like button down below. I also want to remind you, if you did not know already, I have a podcast, the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. If you want to hear me dive into these Week 1 games, into these teams even more in depth, I'll be reviewing every NFL game on the show this week on Wednesday, so you can check that out at the Fully Inflated Football Podcast, wherever you get your audio feeds or in the YouTube channel below. But without further ado, let's get into it, starting in the bottom tier, the Williams watch, the Caleb Williams watch, of course. And our bottom team is going to stay the Arizona Cardinals, who I will say did play hard for Jonathan Gannon for what it's worth, but obvious roster issues. This is the worst team heading into the league, and even though they played well, it still was not enough, and they fall short to the Washington Commanders. Then we've got the Houston Texans at 31, just another team that has a lot of work to do. Those offensive line woes, the injuries have really added up for them, which unfortunately have made C.J. Stroud's debut even harder than it should be. So yeah, they just have a lot of work to do in this DeMeco Ryans build in Houston. Then number 30, I think a team definitely worthy of being in Williams' watch. You know, Justin Fields with the Chicago Bears really couldn't have drawn up a less encouraging third season debut. You know, this idea that, okay, now he's got weapons and another offseason in the system, and year 3 is going to be this big leap for him. Well, still the same old issues for Justin Fields, not trusting routes to throw them before they come open, holding onto the ball too long, taking too many sacks, making horrible reads, turning the ball over, literally threw it straight to Quay Walker. Now the play calling excuses have come in, so it's been the, you know, surrounding cast excuses. Now the, you know, obviously, you know, it's the coach's fault. At some point, Justin Fields just is going to have to learn how to throw the football and read a defense. And right now, it just does not look encouraging. The ship hasn't sailed on it yet, but it is pulling away from the gate at the moment. Then the Washington Commanders are going to round out the bottom tier here. Definitely wasn't the explosive Sam Howell performance that we were looking for, but, you know, he's a little bit ahead of the timeline in terms of Justin Fields. You know, this was just the second start of Sam Howell's career, felt like just very up and down, honestly. You know, some good plays, some bad plays. I would say I was slightly disappointed in Washington's defense. You know, they really didn't have an excuse to not come out and dominate the Cardinals. And they really didn't. It was just kind of a lackluster defensive outing. So I feel like Washington is still trying to put some things together. And I think they're still a bottom tier team after barely scraping by against the worst team in the NFL. But then we have our next tier here. These, to me, are just more balanced, more competent teams. This is the spoiler alert tier. Maybe teams that don't have massive expectations, but any given week they might surprise you. And that's going to start with the Indianapolis Colts, who are going to fall down 3 spots from my preseason rankings. That's more about other teams moving up, though. I think the Colts were about what I could have expected. I thought the play calling was creative with Anthony Richardson, a good combination of read options and RPOs and play action boots. And that defense really played hard, man, even though they are lacking so much talent in the secondary. So it's going to be a bit of not necessarily a lost season for the Colts, but a building season. And I thought they really showed up and played hard against the Jags for what it's worth. In Shane Steichen's coaching rookie debut. Then we've got the Bucs at number 27, climbing up 2 spots. And this is an interesting team because they came out and showed against this Vikings team, winning a close game, that, hey, there's still some remnants from that championship team. You know, you've got some superstar players. Todd Bowles coached defense, played very physical and tough in this game. And then offensively, I felt like they had definitely some inconsistencies as we expected, but Baker played pretty solid in week 1. I don't want to overreact. In fact, I even predicted that Baker would come out and potentially win this game, and people would hype him up, and then he would fall off a cliff. We'll see if that plays out as the year goes on. It'd be a heck of a prediction, but I am intrigued by this Bucs team. I'm open to the idea of them just being better than we kind of all expected, but they are still a team with holes with the O-line and the offense. Just how much do we trust them? They're going to be an interesting team to monitor over the next couple of matchups. Then the Carolina Panthers, I've got falling down 5 spots. Clearly, this is just going to be a little bit of a slower start offensively than we could have hoped for. And I thought it was a lot of good and some bad with Bryce Young. Obviously, people are going to focus on the interceptions. 2 plays where Bryce Young had obviously bad reads, rookie mistakes on the same exact problem too, where he's reading one side of the field and then coming back across to his backside dig or the intermediate part of the field. And he's used to the SEC where these safeties are playing 20, 25 yards of depth. He comes to the NFL in his first start, and that's Jesse Bates there lurking in that 15 to 20 yard area of the field and gets him twice. So Bryce is going to have to learn from that, but ultimately, if you watch the game, you felt pretty comfortable with him dropping back, reading the defense, using his legs when it was appropriate. I thought there was a lot of good in there with Bryce Young, too. Also, just like they didn't feel like a well-coached offense under Frank Reich. A lot of pre-snap penalties. They fumbled a handoff and had some miscommunications across the board, and some really bad game management decisions from Frank Reich too with fourth down stuff. So that was to me where I was most discouraged by this Panthers team. I think Frank Reich's going to have to get this offense back under wraps. I mean, that was the Colts offense when Frank Reich got fired. I don't think it was all his fault, but a lot of this stuff was showing up in Indianapolis under his reign too. So, it's going to be interesting to see how these next couple of weeks go for them. I did predict a slow start for Carolina, but I expected them to look a little bit better coached. Defensively, though, they look really good. I should say that. Brian Burns looked awesome. Then I've got the Denver Broncos also falling down 5 spots. I just really struggle to know what this team's upside's going to be. They did some nice stuff with Russell Wilson and the offense under Sean Payton, but ultimately this felt just like another Broncos game from last year where it's 17-16. The defense is scrapping things out. The offense can't put things all together. I'm worried about how bad that pass rush was for Denver, even though the defense did play well. Not to mention, I just offensively expect them to do better against a Raiders defense that I don't think that highly of. So definitely a disappointing week 1 loss in a game that they really needed to beat the Raiders at home if they're going to look at this AFC playoff picture and feel good about making it in the end. But then I do have those Raiders who scrapped out the win against the Denver Broncos. And this offense actually works right now as long as Jimmy G is healthy. The pass protection was really pretty good. Raiders fans, I tweeted this out. How fun is it to actually watch a quarterback that will sense and move in accordance to pressure and extend plays with his feet? Jimmy was moving around, making stuff happen. Frickin' Jacoby Myers looked great. There was 4 plays in this game where I was like, ooh, nice play, Devontae, with the dreads, working, back shoulders on the outside or whatever. And then he would, turn around and it was number 16. I'm like, dang, that was a great play from Jacoby Myers, who I thought was just a slot guy. Josh Jacobs, too, running extremely hard. So this is not an easy out. Obviously, a team that does have holes, but a big first win for Raider Nation. Before we get to our next tier of teams here, if you're looking for a way to spice up these NFL games even more, you've all seen the screenshots of Underdog Fantasy's Pick'em contest where you can string together lineups setting higher or lower on player stats, and you can get payouts up to 20 times your entry. So you're selecting things like passing yards, interceptions, fantasy points, you name it. And if you hit on all of those picks, again, you can get up to 20 times your money. I love playing Pick'em contests. It's, $2 here, $3 there. Harmless entries that If you win, give you nice payouts, but if you lose, it increased your interest in every given game. Underdog is changing the way you're able to enjoy NFL games, and right now, if you sign up using promo code TFG, they will match up to $100 on your first deposit. It's $100 on your first deposit. That's a full season's worth of Pick'em entries, and maybe the biggest thing, you'll support my channel in a big way on top of that. So if you're not signed up with Underdog, you're missing out. Again, that is promo code TFG at Underdog Fantasy. And let's get back to it. So those are your spoiler alert teams, and then we're starting to get into more interesting teams that I would just describe right now as potentially frisky, teams that I do think have legitimate playoff potential, though some very strong weaknesses too. And that's going to start with the LA Rams. Now, I will hold my hand up. I did predict them to beat the Seahawks. There was a funny moment in the Seahawks game where the Rams take a 2-score lead, and the announcers are like, "Who saw this coming?" And I'm like, I did. I predicted the Rams. I took them to win this game. They match up really well with the Seahawks, but that's not to take away from the Rams. I mean, it is worth noting, like, as long as Stafford is healthy, and we don't know how long that's going to be, they have a top 10 quarterback in the NFL and a top 5 head coach. That's worth something, even if they are, one of the youngest teams in the NFL. Aaron Donald, making a huge impact on this game too. So there's still some stuff to like with the Rams. And these young receivers, man, Puka Nacua and even Tutu Atwell was uncoverable in this game. So they've got some stuff to like, definitely opening up a lot of people's eyes to say, hey, don't count us out just yet. And don't forget just how bad last season was with injuries. Then I've got the Tennessee Titans. I was bummed with this one. I did pick them to beat New Orleans, and the game didn't look terribly different from what I expected. It's just one horrible call on what should have been a defensive touchdown on a strip sack of Derek Carr. Got blown dead, and then for some reason they didn't have enough evidence to overturn it. That was ultimately the difference in this game. The Titans overall looked like the team I expected, where you're going to get some big Derrick Henry runs. Defensively, they're going to play great. But what was discouraging by the Titans was just how bad Ryan Tannehill played in this game. 3 interceptions, some really bad overthrows. This is going to be something to keep an eye on, is if he keeps playing like this, he's going to cost the Titans games, just as he kind of did in this Saints game. And they have a couple of interesting backups that they might turn to. So is he washed, or was this really just a bad, rusty start? Then the Pittsburgh Steelers. Talk about bad, rusty starts. I've got them dropping down 3 spots as well. I still trust this defense to play better in future weeks. The Niners came out with their hair on fire. The Steelers settled in a little bit as the game went on, but not terribly well. Offensively, they did go up against one of the best defenses in the league. It is just week 1, but you got to be really discouraged by what Kenny Pickett did. Some really questionable throws in this one. Struggled to move the ball really at all in the meaningful parts of this football game. So there's probably going to be some crazy week 1 overreactions, burying the Steelers down as a bottom 5 team. I still think they have a lot of talent on this team and have the coaching, at least under Mike Tomlin, to get this thing under wraps a little bit, though the Matt Canada offense was about as bad as we could have hoped. Then I do have the New Orleans Saints jumping up 4 spots. Big first win of the season, obviously, for them. I think Derek Carr played pretty well. Got Raheed Shaheed going, Michael Thomas, Chris Olave. They definitely have some explosive elements of this offense. Some frustrating moments, though, with the offensive line, though. Trevor Penning did not look good at left tackle. That could prove costly for them. And defensively, they obviously played well, but what does this defensive line look like when they're not playing the worst offensive line in the NFL? So I still have some question marks, but a good first win for Derek Carr and the Saints. Then the Atlanta Falcons at number 19. I mean, the biggest thing you can say here is Bijan looks every bit as good as advertised. He looks like that running back where if he can just stay healthy, you're talking about a Hall of Fame talent. Obviously a little bit frustrated that Tyler Algier outsnapped him. It is what it is. It was a game plan that worked for them this week. And Tyler Algier reminded us that he's a damn good back himself. This already might be the best 1-2 punch in the NFL. But yeah, Bijan's going to be a game changer. I do want to see them get Kyle Pitts and Drake London more involved, but right now they're just trying to kind of take the game out of Desmond Ridder's hands. Try to play defense. That works when you're going against a young Panthers team, but what does this team look like when they need to get more into the drop back passing game? Those are going to be your concerns, right? But it was cool to see that this secondary really took over this game. You know, Jesse Bates, the 2 interceptions we talked about earlier, he also forced a fumble. AJ Terrell was incredible in this game too. So that does look like a strength for this defense, and this is going to be a tough out every single week. You're going to have to bring it physically to beat the Atlanta Falcons. And then we have this week's Falcons opponent, the Green Bay Packers, who had one of the kind of stunning performances of the week, really playing excellent in all 3 phases. Matt LaFleur was in his bag, really setting up Jordan Love for success. A couple of kind of gimmicky plays that did lead to a lot of Jordan Love's production, but Love showed as well. You know, he could make some big throws on 3rd down, protected the football. He looked comfortable, and this was about as good of a start as you could have hoped for, especially with no Christian Watson out there. The offensive line looked as good as advertised too, though against one of the worst defensive lines in the NFL. But defensively for the Packers might be where you're most optimistic. This pass rush, we know the talent is there, but you see Devontae Wyatt and Rashawn Gary doing the things they're doing out there, and it gets pretty scary what this group could accomplish. So about as good of a first week for Green Bay as you could have hoped for, and that should be a very interesting matchup there this week between Green Bay and Atlanta. But now we take a tier gap up into teams that definitely have playoff expectations and playoff hopes, and that is going to start with the Seattle Seahawks, who are going to drop down 3 spots in the rankings this week. I don't want to overreact. I did predict them to lose this game after all, and they've struggled in this Rams matchup. But definitely some, complications with the offensive line. We'll have to keep an eye on that Lucas injury at right tackle. But the weaponry, it wasn't as dynamic and unstoppable as a lot of the conversations were on the Seahawks team heading into the year. And just as I've talked about with this Seahawks team, where is the juice with this defense? Now, they didn't have Witherspoon in this game, so obviously not having your number 5 overall pick or whatever it is not ideal. But the front 4 just didn't really feel their presence much in this game at all, and that's a major concern I've had for the Seahawks. All the talk this offseason was, oh, Boye Mafe is going to be awesome. Draymond Jones, big free agent signing. Derek Hall, 2nd-round pick. Just one pressure between the 3 of those players in this game against a Rams offensive line that is not anything special. That was my biggest worry about this Seahawks team, and it really seems to be coming to the forefront early in the season. So, I'm not too worried about the offense figuring things out, but defensively, that no one's going to be afraid of this Seahawks team if the D-line's playing like that. New England Patriots are going to stay put at 16. I thought, yes, they lost, but they gave it their all against an Eagles team that, they got off to like the worst start imaginable, fall down 16-0. An interception bounces off the receiver's hands, results in a pick 6 for Darius Slay. But I thought they really settled in. The pass rush for the Patriots, actually able to get after Jalen Hurts a little bit. I think Mac Jones got comfortable as the game went on and looked okay. These receivers were making some plays. So, I think the Patriots are going to be just fine. I think I had them properly ranked, and obviously I'll adjust accordingly if need be, but I felt pretty good about them. I picked them to lose against the Eagles, but cover, and if a fluky 2-point conversion didn't get called off, they would have done just that. So I felt like they played up to my expectations here this week. Then the Minnesota Vikings are going to stay put at 15 for me. Again, I did just kind of have a bad feeling about this Bucs matchup for them, but I did think their defense played fast and looked like they're going to be pretty solid. And ultimately, I think the offense had some hiccups this week, some unfortunate turnovers. They have a fumble snap that kills a drive. Kirk lost a fumble on an unblocked Antoine Winfield making his return to Minnesota, so I just, I felt like it was a very fitting opening to the Vikings season after winning all of those one-score games last year. They lose one late here in this game, but that Jefferson-Kirk Cousins connection is still there. They also really missed Marcus Davenport, who should be back soon. So, yeah, I'm not terribly worried about the Vikings, but obviously on watch that maybe they are just the 22nd best team in the NFL that got super lucky last year. But ultimately, I feel like they're very similar to what they were last year, which was a 13-win football team. And then the New York Giants, some people might be upset that I don't tank the Giants here. This game was a disaster from the offset, right? It's a rain game. They get a blocked field goal for a touchdown. Saquon pops one up after a reception, a fumble there. They also just very clearly cannot match up with a Cowboys defense that was playing with their hair on fire. I obviously was not impressed by the New York Giants, but I have a ton of faith in Brian Daboll in better conditions against basically anyone other than the Niners or the Cowboys to put together a more serviceable offensive game plan. And I think they'll bounce back, but they're definitely on watch. Then, unfortunately, we've got the New York Jets, who at this point in time, which is 2 in the morning on Tuesday morning, it does seem Aaron Rodgers is going to miss the season. Now, knock on wood, hopefully it's, not a tear, but it certainly is not looking good. And that is just absolutely devastating. It's such a buzzkill to me, it was one of the best narratives of the year to keep an eye on. And then you see what this Jets team is, and it just kind of breaks your heart that we're not going to get to see Aaron Rodgers with this team that, I don't want to come to crazy overreactions or anything, but this very well could be the best team Aaron Rodgers has ever had, and he got to play not even a full drive with them. It's just devastating, but my God, this team is still a good football team, even if they're one of the worst offenses in the NFL with Zach Wilson. It will be interesting to see what kind of game plan now Nathaniel Hackett can shift towards with Zach Wilson. This was the Aaron Rodgers offense. Now they're going to redesign things for Zach Wilson, who did make a couple throws in this game, obviously some bad ones too. But this defense is incredible. Like, they're so disciplined, they're so complete. The secondary making plays, the front four making plays. It's going to have to be like winning 17-13 every week, but this was still a team that surprised us last year with Zach Wilson and Mike White. And, they got a better O-line. They got a better run game. They got better playmakers. They got even more talent defensively. Like, this can still be a better version of last year's Jets team, even without Aaron Rodgers. So I'm not completely writing them off. But in terms of like Super Bowl potential, that probably left with Aaron Rodgers' injury. Then the Detroit Lions at number 12. Congrats, Lions fans. Huge win. Getting into Arrowhead, coming away with a win. They weren't at full strength, and they definitely got some help from Kadarius Toney, and it was very close in the end, but you do got to give the Lions credit. They really, brought it at the line of scrimmage. They pounded this game out on the ground in the end, kept the ball out of Mahomes' hands. That stuff still counts for something, even if they got a little bit lucky, and they did. There's just no way around it. I'm very interested to see how this team plays against a team that's like, playing their best football, because we know the Lions are a team that is going to play this kind of tough, disciplined, style that can help them win close games. But I do still have questions about the upside of this team. I thought Jared Goff was fine. I didn't think the offense did a ton in this game that got you overly excited. Jahmyr Gibbs looked explosive, but just as I talked about, like coming into the year, like David Montgomery's the starting running back there. And defensively, I still have questions, too, as far as what they're going to look like when the opposing receivers can actually catch a football. So I think this is fair credit to the Lions, while also being very open and real in acknowledging that those were not the regular Kansas City Chiefs that they went in and beat. They got another big test this week against the Seahawks. But now we get into our next tier, which are definite teams with Super Bowl hopes, though maybe not quite as complete as our top tier. So the LA Chargers starting this thing off. I mean, the Brandon Staley criticism is an open show at this point. I mean, what is it that you do here, Brandon Staley? Because this defense was putrid to start the season. Offense looked pretty damn good, though. And they were right in it against a Dolphins team playing some of their best football offensively. So they still have a lot to work with. They're actually going to go up 1 despite the loss here this week, as I do think they're a more potent team than the Jets, who fall below them. Then the Jacksonville Jaguars took care of business in Indianapolis. Wasn't always pretty. In fact, as someone that had the Jags to cover this game, frankly, I got a little lucky, because the Jags broke off a long touchdown run at the end, and then they get a 4th down stop at the very end of the game as the Colts were trying to kind of backdoor cover the spread. But anyway, the Calvin Ridley hype definitely justified. That connection should only get better. Lawrence just made throw after throw in this game, showed that he is not due for any regression after he heated up as the season went on last year. So Jags looking nice. They're moving up 1 as the Jets plummet. Then the Baltimore Ravens also going to capitalize on that Jets fall. They take care of business against the Texans. Their pass rush took care of business against a banged up Texans offensive line. That's definitely encouraging and was one of my bigger questions for the Ravens, along with what is Lamar Jackson going to look like in this new offense? I think the jury is still out on that. You know, Lamar definitely did not have this clean, perfect game, but Zay Flowers sure as hell looks good. I will say credit to the Ravens staff. I was critical of the Jadeveon Clowney signing because I thought it would be a progress stopper and take away a ton of snaps from the very interesting David Ojabo, who's basically in his rookie season. You know, I think they need to find out if Ojabo can be a legitimate pass rusher for them this season, if they're going to increase the ceiling of this defense to make a late playoff run. And I was worried about if they would get that answer with Jadeveon Clowney playing a ton. But in this game, David Ojabo played 37 snaps, 28 as a pass rusher, got a sack. And it looks like he's going to have a chance to still develop this year with Jadeveon Clowney. So I will admit I was wrong on that one. And Clowney himself had a pretty good game defending the run, doing what he does well. So Ravens defense looking good. They did suffer some injuries, though, so we'll have to see how they can sustain that. I just don't know why the Ravens can't stay healthy, but good start for them. Their season starts this week, though, in Cincinnati. Then the Cleveland Browns at number 8. I try to tell you guys the improvements in this defense, A, with that defensive line and the 3 additions they made, and B, going from Joe Woods to Jim Schwartz, who knows how to get after it with their front 4, was going to be one of the bigger additions any team made in the offseason. And in a horrible weather game, they were relentless up front, and nobody is looking forward to playing this Browns defense. You pair that on the back end with one of the more underrated secondaries in the entire league. The upside for this defense is even higher than like what Dallas and the Niners are doing, and we saw that here in week 1. So the Browns are coming. The conditions definitely catered to their play style, where they could just kind of ground the ball out and play defense like that. Was really difficult for Joe Burrow to even grip the damn football and throw the ball. So you want to take this one with a grain of salt, but just to see that defensive front getting after it was one box checked from the offseason. As far as evaluating what Deshaun Watson is going to be this year, I don't think we can take too much away. There was so many throws where clearly he couldn't get a hold of the football, and it just, like, he had inaccurate throws, but it was like, is it the weather? Is it karma? Who knows? Regardless, a huge opening win for the Browns. Then the Buffalo Bills going to drop down 2 spots. You know, I had the Bills missing the playoffs in my playoff prediction show. It is a bit of a gut feeling that I just don't think it's going to be the Bills' year here. Now, that's very early victory lap taking, but losing this game after Aaron Rodgers goes down, and, you know, there was no business. You know, they had no business losing this game. You are a hopeful Super Bowl team. The energy was sucked out of not just the fans, but the entire team. Like, the Jets got flat until Josh Allen invited the Jets back into this game with boneheaded interceptions. Just throws that make you scratch your head and say, why are you doing that? He single-handedly lost the Bills this football game. It is what it is. As I said in my Bills deep dive, Josh Allen's insane. He's going to bounce back and have great performances ahead. But I think this year is not a team that can survive bad Josh Allen performances like that. I don't think the offensive line is that great. I don't trust the run game. I think the defense has warts in it when they're not playing against Zach Wilson. A good opportunity to bounce back this week, getting to go home against the Raiders, but I'm definitely worried about the Buffalo Bills. Then I have the Miami Dolphins jumping up to number 6 and earning the number 1 spot in the AFC East. That combination of Mike McDaniel and Tyreek Hill and Tua. I mean, you got to give Tua his credit. He had a great game. I tweeted out that, the Tua experience, it's just, I think you got to, almost in a similar way to Josh Allen, you got to expect there's going to be some roller coasters. He is an aggressive quarterback. Reminds me so much of Phillip Rivers, honestly, where he's going to have some predetermined reads that he's so confident that he's going to get something, and it's just not there, and he's going to throw it anyway, and he's going to get picked, or it's going to lead to these ugly throws. But on top of that, he's going to make some beautiful throws with anticipation. He's going to trust the offense. He's super accurate. He's not a perfect passer, but when you got Mike McDaniel drawing up perfect plays with Tyreek Hill, you can get absolute fireworks. The defense wasn't amazing. I'd be a little bit worried about that, but for the most part, this was an impressive week for the Miami Dolphins, especially without Armstead out there too, right? Like, that was a big injury news that came out that they weren't going to have him, and they barely missed him. But then we have my top tier, and these are your Super Bowl favorites, and I'm going to reluctantly put the Cincinnati Bengals at my number 5 spot after really the worst game of Joe Burrow's career, right? I think this was literally the perfect storm with the weather that just, if you watch the game, he couldn't throw the ball. So you pair that with the fact that he didn't get to practice much this preseason, the fact that for some reason the Browns just always have his number. Not trying to make every excuse in the world for Joe Burrow, but with what he's done throughout his career to this point and what the Bengals did last year with a horrible Week 1 start last year where they lost to the Steelers, I'm not going to panic here, but you obviously have to drop them down. It was a flat performance. The offensive line that was supposed to be one of the best that Joe Burrow's ever had, or the best Joe Burrow's ever had, could not handle the Browns at all. So there's definitely some criticisms there, but I'm still going to keep them in my top tier. I picked them to win the Super Bowl for a reason. I'm not going to freak out quite yet. But the Dallas Cowboys are going to jump over them. Just an absolute dominating performance from a defense that year after year just seems to only get better. The addition of Mazi Smith, another year of Micah Parsons fully working as an edge rusher, Dan Quinn getting fully comfortable with this defense, the addition of Stephon Gilmore to help out the coverage even more in the back end, and just, the kind of just chemistry at this point between all the different players on the defense being able to play off each other. It came out in an all-time great defensive performance against the Giants in bad conditions that definitely helped, but you pair that with an offense that does have Dak Prescott and these receivers and a good run game. It wasn't even the best game for the Cowboys offense, but it's not going to be a bad offense. You pair that with that defense, they're a Super Bowl favorite, honestly, like in that top tier. Then the Philadelphia Eagles are going to hold on to the number 3 spot, taking care of business in New England. Without Hurts in the offense, played well against a good defense. They took care of business there. Defensively, I mean, man, it was the perfect storm in terms of Jalen Carter making his debut against a pair of rookies in Antonio Mafi, who was a horrible pass protector coming out of UCLA, having to start in his first game, and City So, who's a small school kind of developmental piece for them, was really kind of the difference in this game. And then Keyshawn Boutte, a couple of big mental mistakes as well. So the day 3 rooks for the Patriots having to play a little more than they would have hoped in this game, and were a detractor. But the Eagles obviously capitalize, take care of business, and hold on to that number 3 spot. The Kansas City Chiefs, I'm going to have at number 2, and this is legitimately because I have the Niners taking it. I'm I'm going to kind of erase most of what we saw for Kansas City because Travis Kelce will be back, and they just worked things out with Chris Jones. Those are massive, unbelievable gains for this Chiefs team. I mean, you look at their weaknesses and where they were thin, it was going to be D-line outside of Chris Jones and wide receiver after Travis Kelce. You pull both of those out, and it is just Patrick Mahomes trying to make stuff happen. But you put them back in, and those are game-breaking players. So I'm just not worried about the Chiefs. This is much more about the Niners coming out with an absolute statement game in week 1. I know the Steelers didn't play great, but that's still a solid Steelers team that they embarrassed. And the superstar talent that this team has, you just feel it watching them play, that it's just different. And if this group can stay healthy and Brock Purdy can do what he's doing where he's moving around, he's making plays out of structure, hitting what's in structure when it's there, paired with this defense that doesn't look like they're going to miss a beat, plugging in Drake Jackson for Samson Ebukam, the way these linebackers fly around, that pass rush, this has a chance to be a really special football team if they continue to play like this. I think they earned this #1 ranking this week, and you guys will just have to let me know what you think of the Niners taking the #1 spot, what you think of these rankings as a whole. What do you think of the new graphics? I love them personally, but I hope you guys enjoy them. Please do hit that like button if you haven't yet. It really does help me out. Make sure you subscribe. Check out the podcast as well, whether that's in the separate YouTube channel or on your audio feeds. That's the Fully Inflated Football Podcast. We'll be breaking down all of these games in depth. But until then, thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Peace out.